I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today, I am going to be reviewing The Keylock Man by Louis L'Amour, published in 1965, one of his earlier books. You know, we always talk about the covers because I love graphic design, I love illustration, so we always give a quick review to the cover artwork before we even start. First thing noticeable about this Louis L'Amour novel, as opposed to a lot of the others, is the type is at the bottom of the illustration, not the top. Most Louis L'Amour novels, the title and author are up here. Oh, but they pulled a sneaky one on us, folks. They moved it down, which is okay. Makes sense considering the illustration we got. Because the illustration we got, the cowboy up top. Wouldn't make sense to have all these words covering a cowboy. I mean, are you following the logic here? I mean, can you put two and two together here, people? I mean, it's not that hard. It's not that hard. There's a reason they did it the way they did it. And let's talk about the illustration itself. Pretty damn good. That's a great cowboy painting. Great cowboy illustration by an illustrator named Tom Hall, who did several of the Louis L'Amour books. Cover talk out of the way. You know, I got all the Louis L'Amour books here. We're reviewing them one at a time on this channel till they're all reviewed. Might take me 10 years, but we're also reviewing all the Stephen Kings, and by God, we're reviewing everything in my library. 3,000 books. I'm looking at my library right now, looking at all 3,000 books, and the library goes from behind me all the way around the room, back to right here. Gonna be a lot of book reviews in 10 years, but we're gonna do it. Because I love books. Keylock Man, what it's about. What it's about, it is about a wanted man, a man wanted for murder, Mr. Keylock. They call him the Keylock. Why do they call him Keylock Man? Well, because he rides a horse that has a brand on it that's shaped in the shape of a key lock. So he's the murderer known as the Keylock Man. Let's read the start of this thing, all right? I love the first 4 paragraphs of this book. I'll try to make this reading real quick because I don't like reading in my reviews much, but I do like reading Louis L'Amour sentences because I think Louis L'Amour paints a great picture. Now, this is the very opening of the book. The man called Keylock was a man alone, and before him lay wilderness. Behind him were searching men, and each was armed, each carried a rope. Each rope was noosed for hanging, and each man was intent on the purpose of the chase. The solitary rider did not fear his loneliness, for he had the companionship of his own mind. He had strength also, patience beyond that of most men, and some knowledge of the wild lands into which he rode. If the men who pursued him knew nothing of him, he at least knew of them, and was stronger because of it. They were men shaped and tempered to the harsh ways of a harsh land, strong in their sense of justice, ruthless in their demand for punishment, relentless in their pursuit. In the desert and wilderness they had built their homes, and from the desert and wilderness they drew their courage and their code, and the desert knows no mercy. The wilderness shows no kindness. Before the man called Keylock lay a fragmented and torn and magnificent land, gnarled and ancient. It was a land of shattered battlements, broken towers, and the headless figures of vast, shapeless gods. An empty land, yet crowded with epics in stone, harried by the wind and thunderstorms, ripped by flash floods, blistered by summer's heat, frozen by winter's cold. Paints a good picture of what's happening. We got Mr. Keylock Man. He is alone, riding through the harsh deserts that look like, well, they look like this painting. You know, he compares the big red rock mountains of the desert to like battlements of a castle and the harshness of a land. And then the Keylock Man also thinks about the men that are chasing him, how these men have been tempered and honed in this land. And not only that, but he's got some respect for them. He knows they are lawmen, and he knows that they are doing their job, and they're going to do it relentless in their pursuit. So he respects what they're doing because he's an innocent man. There was a murder committed. The blame was laid on the Keylock Man, and he had to flee, and these guys are now chasing him. So what we've got is a story, a very, very interesting story about an innocent man who's a good man being chased across the harsh desert, fleeing into the west, north of the Grand Canyon, sort of around, well, it's around the Lee's Ferry, Page, Arizona area, if you know where I'm talking about. And I appreciate that about Louis L'Amour, that he always uses realistic and accurate historical places and towns in his books. Anyway, the Keylock Man is an innocent man. He's a good man, and he's fleeing from this murder charge from people who he also knows are good men. And so this is a real good example. This is a really good allegory on the Old West. Basically, it's a lawless place trying to be, the law is being kept by whoever has a moral code of any kind. It's just like, if there is no law, and Keylock thinks about this, if there is no law, well then who keeps it? Who is the law exactly in a lawless land? If there is no laws, who's going to keep? Well, there is no law, so they can't keep the laws. Everything is free game. But he also knows that society wants there to be laws, but there's no government. The Wild West was wild. There was no, people could just murder and kill, and if you just happen to, if the town you lived in just happened to, by consensus, vote in a guy as sheriff, well, he was sheriff just because those people voted him in, but he really had no power. There was no real governing body that said, we deem you with the power. Anybody could just, and this is the dilemma that's facing the Keylock Man. He's like, I'm an innocent man, and I'm being chased and hunted by guys that will not give up, but it's not like they're evil men for chasing me, because they really do have a legitimate reason to think that I'm the killer. And I don't hold any malice towards these guys. I know they're going to be relentless in their pursuit. They're going to keep going until they find me and kill me. And what do I do? Do I defend myself? They're going to hang me. So very interesting book. A very interesting look at a unique situation in the Old West where good men were fighting good men. Who was right? Who was wrong? How do you keep the law if there is no law? Who keeps it? Who's in charge of who? If the land is lawless? Very interesting, and I like this book a lot. So the chase, that's the setup of the plot. And it's a chase across the desert, Lee's Ferry, southern Utah, Page, Arizona, Kanab, Utah, those types of places. That's where the chase is happening. And, Louis L'Amour's got his great descriptions of the desert. You don't want to be lost in a desert. You don't want to get lost, even nowadays. Even if you got GPS on your phone, you don't want to get lost in the Utah desert. Anyway, I give this a good solid 8 out of 10, The Keylock Man. It's a good little story. It's a short one, only about 130 pages. You can read it in an hour or two. Great stuff, man.